Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of our podcast. I am here with my dad via Zoom or FaceTime or whatever because he is in Long Beach, California. He is enjoying his time while I am slaving away here at work. But we did make some time to talk about our political topic for the week, which is immigration. So I'm going to go ahead and let my dad kind of guide the conversation. So what exactly are we going to outline here?
As everyone knows, immigration is just one of those topics we love in America, pro and con. It's a pretty beat up topic, but it's a very important topic. I am in Long Beach. I'm not on vacation. I'm actually out here doing something productive. But I am here to contribute to this podcast as we always do. A couple of things, and I have to give a shout out to my daughter. She's always real good about getting her sources ready and having her information so she can cite, or at least, relate where she's getting her information. And I've been pretty bad about that. I'll read stuff and just kind of remember what I read and don't bring it into the conversation where I got my information. I do want to bring that up because trying to find resources on the internet is a fun topic. And Victoria and I kind of want to keep this moderate. We don't want to jump to one side or the other or espouse the view or say that one side is better than another. But it's pretty hard to do in today's internet to get all that information and get kind of a neutral standpoint. One of the things I've learned in doing research is you can't let what they tell you guide you as to whether or not they're nonpartisan, liberal, conservative. You have to kind of go back and dig a little bit into who's actually funding the organization. It gives you a better idea of how liberal or how conservative or how nonpartisan it might be. Okay. All that being said, we are going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of immigration, basically because we're local. We're talking about it in Texas. What immigrants contribute to Texas. And I have found an article, a compendium of recent academic work showing negative impacts of immigration. So we're going to work with those documents. This is from the Center for Immigration Studies, and we'll talk about this. First of all, historically, immigration, this country is built on immigration. We came over on the Mayflower. But even before that, the Spanish were in South America and Central America and the Caribbean. So Europe has immigration from Europe has been the development of this country. We all know the Native Americans and the story of the Native Americans who were pushed back further and further as the Europeans came in. So when people talk about immigration, you have to put it in the proper context. This is a country of immigrants. Immigration has built this country because it has brought the people here that built it.
Okay. So before you go on and talk about a little bit of the about immigration, I do want to point out that there is something happening. Or hold on, wait, let me start over. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and interject because before you go on to talk about immigration and how this country was built on immigration, basically, we do want to point out that there was colonization and conquistadors and a whole bunch of people who came over here and took over native land, native tribes, and basically colonized what is known today as the United States. So we do want to recognize that there has been a history of people coming in and basically wiping out communities and people who were here before. That is just the history of the United States. That's the truth of how we got here today. But also the history of the United States is built on immigration. So I did want to pause for a second and point that out, that we are aware that that is part of the history, that there were people here before. But then part of our history as a country is the fact that we came in here and colonized this area. And then following that colonization is when really the history of immigration is what built America. So we do recognize that we did take over in terms of colonization, and that's just how our country was built. So that is something to recognize. There are commentaries on good and bad and decolonization and all that stuff. We're not going to get into that. We're just going to get into, we recognize that, and also how this country was built on immigration. Okay, Dad, keep going.
No, that's fine. No, I did touch on it just half a second, so I'm glad you clarified all that. So you have to look at things. You have the pros and cons of immigration being, and one of them is, how does it affect labor? And that's really one of the bigger drivers of, do we want immigrants? Do immigrants bring us people who take on more jobs? Do bring us quality labor, high-skilled labor? Or do immigrants just bring us low-skilled labor and they just take over jobs that no one in America wants to do? And then how much of the labor force are they part of? Are they squeezing, Americans or citizens who are here? Are they taking jobs away from those people? And that's where you get into a lot of the devil in the details about all this. And people will argue that, businesses take advantage of labor, inexpensive labor. The immigration labor is less expensive, so they'll hire them over citizens who are already here. But that takes away also some of the fact that immigrants have, all through the history of this country, came here and started their own businesses. And a lot of the small businesses in this country have been developed by immigrants, whether it be restaurants, whether it be construction, whether it be retail.
The place that I'm working at right now is, was started by someone who immigrated to America.
So we have the balance of, do people actually benefit from the immigrants coming over here, starting their businesses, supplying labor, or do they squeeze out people who are already here? And that is the kind of the push me, pull me of the majority of the immigration political argument in America. So there are a variety of papers that address whether or not the immigrants affect the local labor market negatively in this, like I said, it's compendium, hope I'm saying that right, a variety of articles that goes back and forth. So I'm just referencing that as a way for you to look at this. One of them is the contribution of immigration to local labor market adjustment. Basically, this talks about why don't more Americans leave economically depressed places and move to parts of the U.S. where more jobs are available. And this is important because, we have migrations within the country of people moving to where the jobs are, so to speak. And this paper addresses that. One answer, according to the paper, is that foreign immigration crowds them out. New immigrants tend to settle in high employment areas, reducing the potential rewards for citizens who move there. And this, of course, illustrates how how immigration can limit the opportunities for down and out natives to benefit from economic growth. And of course, there's other articles of this, local adjustment to immigrant-driven labor supply shocks. Whenever an immigrant community comes to the United States, they tend to go where there are already people from their culture exist. So you see large amounts of, to Vicky's point, where her business is, there are a lot of Korean-driven businesses. And of course, businesses that cater to the Korean market or the Asian market, other Asian countries. So this is one of the things that happen when you bring in that. Now, historically, there's been this that immigrants need to assimilate in this country. In other words, they need to learn English. They need to learn American way of life. They need to participate in American way of life. They need to adapt to American way of life. The more recent history of immigrants from all these different cultures and countries is they tend to bring their culture, their values, their way of life, their language, and keep it here. They're not adapting as much as they used to, or as much as we maybe think they used to, depending on how large the community is in any given area. So this is another problem that, many people struggle with. And it's huge in the Southwest because, of course, Mexico and a lot of people speaking Spanish. A lot of people feel that the immigrants who come from Mexico or Central America or South America should learn English, whereas there are now so many businesses of Spanish culture or Hispanic culture or Mexican immigrants or Central American immigrants that a lot of immigrants don't have to learn English, especially the older ones. Their children, of course, go to school and learn it, but they end up speaking two languages. So this is an important point for people who think, well, immigrants are taking away American values because, they're not learning English. They're not learning what's important to the local communities. They're creating their own communities. Whereas, again, the history of that is that's the way it's always been. In the Southwest, it's real predominant because of the large influx of people from Mexico and Central America creating their own businesses. And they just have whole sections of town where Spanish is the main language, or whole small towns where Spanish is the primary language, not English. So it creates an interesting dynamic. And of course, this also helps to build the fear of a lot of people that immigrants are taking over.
And before you move on, I do want to go ahead and cut in to add something that is relevant to the topic that you're making right now, or to the point you're making right now. When it comes to the fear that immigrants are taking over jobs. Now, I'm reading a report that was released from the American Immigration Council. And basically that report examines the impact and contributions of immigrant workers in the United States meat and dairy industries.
I read that.
Oh, you read that as well? Okay. So let me...
So it's not just those two industries too. Construction's huge in that.
Well, in this report, maybe we're talking about different reports, because in this report, it's just talking about meat and dairy industries. Anyways,
okay, I must have a broader report from them, but go ahead.
Right, yeah. Well, I imagine American Immigration Council, they have multiple reports on the topic that we're talking about. So I'm sure we both read different reports. It found that immigrant workers play a vital role in producing America's food, easing labor shortages, and stabilizing food prices. So basically, the role that immigrants are having in the labor shortage is that it's helping kind of keep grocery costs down. Simply because they're the ones filling in the roles. Now, we can talk about issues related to labor, because the reasons a lot of people are leaving is because the benefits aren't necessarily the best for those workers. And the fact that immigrants are coming in to take those jobs is kind of, a catch-22. I don't know if it's a catch-22, but...
No, you're hitting the, I don't want to say the dichotomy of it all, but you're hitting the point. Where is the benefit? Is immigration, the overall benefits of immigration, the low cost labor, or the impact they bring to our economy with new businesses, the overall a plus to the United States? Or does immigration take a drain on the United States because, they're not citizens, they're not contributing to the tax base, they're using our social services. So these are the kind of the pros and cons of, does immigration benefit America, or does it benefit, more particular to our point, employment or labor in Texas? And you have to balance these sides with, do Americans fear losing their job because of immigrants? Is that a valid fear? And of course, that's where you get into digging deeper into the details that we, cannot get into in 30 minutes, but we would at least present both sides. That what do they contribute, and where do they take it? Where do they take away? What are the negative effects? And yes, there is in the American Immigration Council. I mean, they're a council dedicated to the concept of immigration, but they're pro-immigration. So they're going to, their statistics, their facts, their information is going to be to help convince Americans that we need to continue to support immigration to this country. You have to find, again, the contrast in that to give people an idea. Well, what are the things that you know, the cost of it? You know, some people are very fearful that immigrants bring in crime. How much of that is so? Some people are fearful, again, of losing jobs. Do they take over industries and it pushes out, you know, people who've lived there and they do not get the job because the immigrants are willing to work for less? Is that a fair argument? These are things you have to kind of dig into and find out, what are we looking for? And again, you get into trying to find this for a 30-minute topic, so we'll probably be coming back to this. And I had to go through and find, you know, just like I said, this huge assortment of articles. And so it gets to be a little overwhelming. And again, there's some of the things I want to talk about or just mention is the wage and employment effects in the impact of immigration on the labor market. This was done by Anthony Ito in the Journal of Economic Surveys. It's this is more of a broad-based article. It talks more about immigration worldwide, and it talks about immigration create winners and losers among the citizens of any given country. Low-skill immigration tends to make low-skill workers of the country losers. High-skill your professionals in that country are the winners because it creates a larger inequality between the rich and the poor, so to speak. And of course, you know, they're talking about there is no evidence that immigrants hurt any American workers. Well, many workers do lose if new immigrants come in and work for less. Businesses hire them, and of course, people who are used to minimum wage or higher are losing their jobs to this.
So the main issue,
balance that with
right. So the main issue in regard to that point is the fact that if immigrants are able to take the lower paying jobs, then it takes away from the fact that people who are demanding fair wages won't get those fair wages because someone's available to do it for less. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. That's one of the main arguments against having immigrants come in and taken, especially, you know, and this is an issue in regards to what kind of work people want to do. I mean, a lot of these immigrants are cleaning houses, cleaning hotels, you know, doing trash collection, things of this nature, which do take away people who've traditionally, the less educated people in America, you know, these are the jobs they would normally man. And this, of course, if someone comes in and does it for less than what they were getting paid, you know, businesses are out for one thing. They're out for a profit. And so they're going to look for ways to hold down labor costs. Now, the other argument that is maybe we should raise the wages of, you know, protect immigrants in regards to wages, make sure that they're paid equal to American workers or U.S. citizens. And so that's where you get arguments from, the American Immigration Council, where they're saying we should raise up immigrants so we don't create this problem where normal citizens who have lived here lose their jobs because immigrants can work for less. You know, make sure that the immigrants are paid what Americans are paid. So, you know, that's, you know, how much of that is driving people's fears. Again, fears aren't always based on statistics. So you have to work through that when you try to decide, is immigration a net positive to this country? Historically, it has been. According to the American Immigration Council, you know, we've talked about a couple of things there. They are contributing highly to the jobs in Texas. And it's not just, you know, like I'm saying, the low end of the pay scale jobs. It is more high end too, especially the children of immigrants tend to grow and become let's say, upper middle class, if their parents owned a business and instilled good work values in them, a lot of them go to college. A lot of them become, dentists, doctors, engineers. And if you live in the Southwest or travel to the Southwest, you find this all over the place. Talk to people who have lived here and hold positions of, I don't want to say positions, hold jobs, high-paying jobs, whether they're attorneys or whatever. A lot of them are sons and daughters of first-generation immigrants.
I do want to make a point about the criminalization or the crime statistics related to immigrants coming in the United States. There has been a ton of research explaining that immigration is not linked to higher crime rates and really hasn't been for decades. But the issue is still very serious, or the concern is still out there that immigrants are criminals are coming in to do awful things. Okay, so I did want to not make a point, but just lay out the fact that we do recognize that there is that concern out there, even though there has been evidence showing that immigrants are not aren't linked. Immigration is not linked to higher crime rates, and this is all according to data by the FBI. But then again, there is that fear, and I want to say that part of it is the media, and people have their thoughts about, mainstream news media, but there are issues in terms of how some stories will be sensationalized, and something that happened in a small town in the south of Texas will become national news because of the violence of that crime. And just the fact that it's kind of like a car wreck when you pass by. You can't help but look. So that is something that I did want to recognize, that there is still that fear, but I think a lot of that fear stems from the fact that some of the violent crimes that are done by someone who is not from this country tends to be sensationalized compared to a lot of the other violent crimes that are perpetuated in cities across America.
No, that's a good point. And there again is, having facts in regards, you said you were using FBI statistics, helps people understand whether or not immigration is.
Well, let me just say, yes, I will look at FBI statistics, but I have my own issues with the FBI. But that can be something, that can be talked about later. But yes.
Wait, let's not talk about the FBI.
They are a resource to use. Let me just say that.
Especially because they publish national crime statistics.
Yeah.
And they do push out that information. So they are a valid resource. But that's what you want to use. Technically, the FBI is not a partisan. They are nonpartisan. They are just pushing out information that they gather. So that's a great, point to make, because if you do fear that immigrants are coming in and going through these crime sprees, and they do, there's no denying that there's criminals in immigration. But here's the flip side of that. There are Americans who commit crimes too. And, how much more do immigrants commit crimes than Americans? And that's, what are you looking at? And to your point about the FBI statistics, that's what you would compare. Are they any more, any less? Mm-hmm. Are they the same? Mm-hmm. And so those are the things you would want to address if you're trying to say whether or not you are for immigration. If you can find that the FBI statistics uphold that immigrants have a higher propensity to commit crimes than Americans, then you got to do something about that. Mm-hmm. But if they don't, then you have to look at the positive impacts, what they bring, the businesses they bring. They're creating jobs when they bring these businesses. Of course, a lot of them are they employ people within their own community. But then again, Americans employ people within their own community.
Mm-hmm. And then I do
want to do it.
Mm-hmm. I did want to
assimilate people. You got to make sure they feel comfortable being assimilated.
Yes, and I do want to recognize that they're right now. Okay, for example, they're both sides of the political spectrum do not have, if we're talking policies, do not have good policies in place for immigrants. The Democrats don't have good policies in place for immigrants. The Republicans don't have good policies in place for immigrants. And to say that the Texas border is being run perfectly fine would be an incorrect statement. So although we are laying out here that the Texas border, or that immigration, there are arguments that immigration is good for the United States because we're a country built on immigration. Again, the main issue lies with the policies that are directed towards those immigration practices. And at the moment, there's a lot of immigrants who are left, out to dry because they don't have the proper resources to be assimilated into this country. And then that can create a wealth of issues that Republicans can run against. And that also creates a wealth of issues that Democrats ignore.
Oh, no. Again, this is a huge topic for a 30-minute podcast. No, you're right. We have a disaster of an immigration policy, and I don't see an answer. I agree with you 100%. The Democrats nor the Republicans have an answer. Now, the Democrats and Republicans will tell you they have an answer so they can get elected. But big picture, again, the need for social services for immigration, the need for immigrants to understand, they're coming to America. They need to participate in America. The need for making sure immigrants are paid the same wages as everybody else. And then, we just can't accept everybody. I know, we've had an open arms policy historically, but we're at the point now where, we're a very large country. What do technically there's immigration quotas, and that's another story, but there are quotas. But how well are we following our own quotas? How well are we following our own laws when it comes to immigration? And again, this is something I hope we do come back to.
We will come back to it.
Because we're just touching on giving people an idea of how big of a topic this is, and how deep it really needs to be researched to get a good idea of, do we want immigration? How much immigration do we want? And what are the benefits? And what do we need to do to make sure it works for us?
Yeah, exactly. So what we're going to do, I don't want to, sorry to cut you off, Dad, even though I do it all the time, but my laptop's about to die. So that's why we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. And from there, we're going to come back and talk about immigration policy in another episode, specifically more related to the policies in Texas. And then also on a national level, we'll incorporate some of that. But thank you so much for listening to us, and I hope you have a great Saturday.